talking first about what you do in your own work that intersects with the issue of food waste, reactions to the film, but also what you think are the most pressing, the most important steps that we can take at any level, individual, institutional, national, when it comes to food waste. So why don't we hear first from Karen, then from Samantha, and then we can hear perhaps jointly from David and Evie.
Great. So representing the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, I have to do a very quick 101 because a lot of people don't know that food banks are like wholesalers in the charitable food distribution network. We acquire massive quantities of food and then distribute it out through a network of incredibly valuable partners. We have about 212 food pantries, soup kitchens, and shelters in our network, including the Haven. And we also operate some programs ourselves to distribute food directly to people in need. So last year, that was about 25 million pounds of food that came through the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank. We cover 25 counties and 8 cities in Central and Western Virginia. So that's context. Everything I'm seeing in this film and what I'm thinking about around food waste, we are thinking through the lens of food insecurity, right? There are 1 in every 10 people in the Blue Ridge region is living with food insecurity, meaning they do not know where they're going to get their next meal or if they have enough food to feed their family tomorrow. So we think in terms of scope and scale and how do we reach 110,000 people a month are coming to us and to our partners to get something to eat. So we think in those big terms. Where we've been working for quite some time is in rescuing food from the retail network. Just about every grocery retailer in our service area is part of our program we call the Partner Pickup Program. We call it that because we serve almost as a matchmaker. We work with the retailers at national and regional scale levels and coordinate with them a schedule for pickup of food that has not been sold in the stores, and it sometimes comes directly to us, but most often what we do is we take a food pantry partner or a shelter or a soup kitchen and we give them the schedule, and if they can get volunteers there at a certain day and certain time, you can go every Tuesday and Thursday and the store wants you there at 2 o'clock and they'll give you whatever food they have. And that way the food goes directly to the partners and they can distribute it out quickly without the food coming to the food bank first and then back out. It's much more efficient that way, and we're making sure the food gets to people before it goes bad. So last year, about 37% of the food that we acquired last year came through the retail partners. So we're rescuing quite a bit of food, and over the last 5 years, that was about 35 million pounds of food. It's a huge savings, obviously. We rely on it, our partners rely on it. It's good food, a lot of produce, a lot of shelf-stable food, a lot of baked goods, breads, cakes. We'd love to see that, go down a little bit, but obviously it's available and we'll take what we can. So we've been doing that for quite a while, and that's a big savings for us. The other opportunity I think we see for a food bank, again, thinking in terms of scalability, is rescuing food from the fields. A lot of the farmers and growers in our area find it less expensive to plow that food back under instead of picking, and if they don't have a buyer for it, instead of picking and getting it out of the field. So we've been working on a couple of strategies over the last few years that we're very proud of and excited about. There was a Virginia state tax credit now passed last year, just over a year ago, with the help from the food banks and some state legislators, and the governor signed it. And we're looking to see what impact that has. Basically, farmers and growers who donate to food banks can get a tax credit for the value of the food. And there's a cap on it, and we're looking to see how much we can maximize that and prove its worth. So we're exploring that. We also work directly with some donors to create funds that we can use for Virginia growers specifically to reimburse them for that cost of picking and packing out the food. So we can expand the variety of food, more locally grown food, and less waste that way. So those are a couple of ways that the food bank is addressing this.
Terrific. Actually, why don't we go, Evie and David, you can talk a little bit about your work at the Haven, since you are potentially on the receiving end of some of this recovered food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You want to start?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Practically everything I wrote was in the movie. So I just want to say one thing about Massimo. I saw him go into someone's home. He has many, many videos on YouTube where you can watch him at work. And he went into a private home and he just opened the refrigerator and he used everything in that refrigerator that they were going to throw out. And he made, from bread, he made pasta, which it was in the movie. It's amazing. He is amazing. And he took all the food from the Olympic Village in Rio and created this what was it called?
Refectorio.
Refectorio, with all the food that the Olympic Village was going to throw away, and he created this place near the favelas in Rio to feed poor and homeless people. I just want to say a little bit about the Haven, and then David can sort of add to it. We get donations from all over the city. We get 4 times a month, the first and third Monday and Friday of every month, we get a van full of food from Trader Joe's. We get once a week, we come to the food bank. We also go to Great Harvest, and then private donations. Today we must have gotten about 25 dozen eggs from a church who just went and collected eggs for us. Eggs, sugar, coffee, and milk are the most expensive things that we have to pay for. And so we always, when people say, well, what can we give you? We always say those things. In turn, because we only serve breakfast, we often get donations from people that we can't use. And so we have a network now at the Haven where we give food to other people. And right now, the people that we're giving it most to are refugees through the Islamic Center of Central Virginia. We give it to the Adult Learning Center, also Crescent Hall, and the Crossings.
Salvation Army.
And the Salvation Army. And so, and that is quite a bit of food that we help these people too. And also, we also try to use everything that comes in that's possible. We have redefined breakfast. We give roasted vegetables because we get a lot of vegetables, and we do roasted vegetables practically every day. We make frittata because we get so many eggs. We always have fruit salad. We make homemade granola, and
Yogurt.
David makes yogurt. We do things for breakfast that are unusual, but yet everybody at the Haven loves it. It's an eclectic menu, and it has increased their horizon and their taste buds in huge ways. So we're very proud of that. I think that as one of the questions is, what do you see as the most crucial action to take, was one of the questions here. And I think it's education. And I just want to say, in watching the film and the school, every school in Charlottesville City now has a schoolyard garden. And also, I taught in Charlottesville City schools for 23 years, and I taught preschoolers. And one of the things I realized was the waste, because preschoolers can't eat the whole meal. And so what was happening, and I saw this throughout the school really, but particularly in preschool, we would give them a carton of milk for breakfast, and maybe they would drink half of it, and then it would get thrown away. So instead, we started writing their names on the carton, and then we would refrigerate it and give it to them at lunchtime. And if they finished it and wanted more, we had more. And then in the cafeteria, which is like total waste city, when I was working part-time after I retired, I was in charge of a certain second grade group. And I said, let's just have a shared table. So if you're not going to eat your apple, instead of throwing it away, just put it on the shared table. And it's little things like that, I think, that really stretch your consciousness and stretch the children to understand that food is just not, it's not like a refrigerator or planned obsolescence, which this society really just trashes things. Telephones, refrigerators, stoves, clothes, whatever it is. Food is not in the same category. And I think that education is extremely important at a very young age. That's it.
So, Evie, you just gave me a great idea, because I think many of us are familiar with the work of City Schoolyard Garden. We know that there are gardens now, as you say, in almost every school in the city. Next step, pigs. Right? It just makes sense, right? Get some pigs in those gardens. David?
I'm going to say about 12 things that are going to seem unrelated, but so many things hit me in this picture. My son runs the Free Union Grass Farm, commercial plug. There's a flock of pigs, or how do pigs come in? A flock or a herd? I don't know.
Well, you got me. A murder?
But for me to drive my waste food 13 miles to the pigs is an issue. How do I do that? He's too busy to come and get my waste food. If there was a way to do that, it would be done. The pigs are living right out there, and it would save him, but I don't know how to do that. We've thought about it. I want to put a plug in for the Market Street Market, who every day culls their vegetables off the downtown mall and gives us 1, 2, and 3 boxes a day of less than perfect vegetables and fruits, and sometimes even other things. 7 days a week, they give us these wonderful foods for breakfast, which is often the source of our collard greens. Collard greens for breakfast is a daily event at the Haven because of Market Street Market. I had the honor of judging a food contest here the other day, and the idea of art and food, they put in front of me the most beautiful 6 plates of food that I have seen in much of my life, and I had to pick the best. I voted for Aramark, and they won.
All right, UVA got it.
But I saw art as beauty, and we try that at the Haven, but it's not quite as easy as it was for these chefs to do that very thing. Did you see the kids from Louisiana with their carton of chocolate milk? And on the bottom of the carton it said fat-free. We have been trained in this country to think fat-free is a good thing. It's not a good thing. The same people that sold us cigarettes sell us fat-free, and we have in a country of obesity. A philosophical change has to happen at the food bank. It was in their newsletter, send fat-free milk. This is not a good thing. It's been a factor in our national obesity epidemic to somehow think we should be drinking fat-free milk, and that was better for us. Fat-free salad dressing, full of sugar. Fat-free milk, more sugar. The science is saying that these days, but there's a whole philosophy out there that I'll get milk with a date on it, and guests at the Haven will look at the date, and if that date is 1 day past on that milk, that guest will say, oh, that smells, I can't drink that. There's a philosophy of we can't eat or drink food past the date. A lot of stuff we get is past the date. And I'm not critical. I love what these people do, but they throw out food past the date too.
No.
All right. We talked to your volunteers. I thought about bigger issues. The people trying to eat in Boston on a minimum wage job Of course they can't buy food and pay rent with the state of minimum wage in our country. Those are the main things. Ray Fattorio lives at the Haven in Charlottesville. That kind of taking food, the wonderful food we get from the food bank and all the donations gets turned into deluxe food every day of the week. Come and see us.
Fantastic. Samantha.
One more thing. We actually opened up a little cafe for the public on Wednesdays. It's one day a week from 12 to 1:30, and our guests are now running the restaurant. And they're cooking, they're prepping, they're hosting, they're waiting on tables, and it's for them.
The donations for the food go to the guests.
Yeah.
It's not a fundraiser for the Haven.
Right. It's a $10 donation because we're using food that has been donated to us. And it's we have served food from guest chefs from all over the world.
Fantastic. Thanks, Evan.
That's a
Great.
commercial plug for us too, because UVA Dining will be hosting that meal this Wednesday, on 25th. So.
All right. Wait, say that again?
Should I say it louder?
Say it louder.
Okay, so UVA Dining will be the guest chef at the Haven on April 25th, this coming Wednesday.
April 25th, 1 o'clock?
12 to 1:30.
12 to 1:30.
For lunchtime.
All right. Good to know. We will get the word out.
And just one more thing.
Yeah.
I saw a YouTube video where supermarkets in Ohio are giving free food to children under 12 while their parents shop. And I think that's a very good thing that we could do here. We could go to Kroger and Wegmans and just suggest that to them.
It also cuts down on whining when the kid is in the car and saying, I
That's
want
right.
that, buy me the cherry. Yeah.
Right. And waste.
Terrific. Samantha,
So I just launch into it.
launch into it.
Okay, I'm Samantha Jameson. I know a lot of you. I'm the sustainability coordinator for UVA Dining, which is run by Aramark, a food service management company. I'm a little bit out of the community access. My job is more supporting the waste minimization efforts across our 24 locations. So we serve, our directors in the back, Matt, I think 76,000 meals a week. We've got close to 10,000 students and faculty on meal plans. We have 3 residential all-you-care-to-eat dining rooms where you swipe in. You've got 6 to 8 stations, which are continuous service all day, 7 days a week. And then a handful of retail locations. We've got a catering company, and then we run all the concessions for the athletic venues at UVA. So it's a huge volume of food that we're going through. You might have to prompt me on a couple of these things. I've got a lot of thoughts going through my head.
So let's hear some of those thoughts. But what's important, I think, about the volume of food is that what you're doing at dining is important, not just for reducing food waste, but also for establishing models,
Yep.
right? Because it's like a huge laboratory. So I'm hoping you can tell us some of the things that have worked in the efforts over the last few years to cut down on food waste.
So our big partner, we have partnered with a company called LeanPath. LeanPath is like technology that we use where we capture every single food scrap and trimming back of house. And so when I say pre-consumer, that's all of the scraps that come through when the chefs are preparing meals. And so we track all of that waste pre-consumer, and then we compost all of it. But the big benefit of that technology is we're able to capture exactly what we're producing, where we can make things more efficient. And then we can forecast. And so we couple that with the amount of students or the amount of guests we anticipate having, and then we forecast exactly what we should produce to serve those guests. And so we try to minimize the amount of food that we're overproducing. And then anything that is for inclement weather, we do have a food donation program, but we do follow the EPA food recovery hierarchy. And our priority is point source reduction. So not having excess food on the plate to begin with. We're producing exactly what's needed when students walk in the door. And then again, we have a great partnership with Black Bear Composting in Charlottesville. And so our 3 dining rooms are all very close to zero waste. There's no food that comes out of our dining locations that ends up in the landfill. Everything ends up as compost.
Wait a minute. I need to hear that again. You're saying 100% or near 100% of the food that is served at all of these venues is out of the landfill. It's either eaten.
The retail locations are tricky. Post-consumer is another issue that we're dealing with.
Okay.
And so when students take out from a cafe and they've got their little box meals, yes, there's food waste that's captured there that we are not able to send. to a compost facility. But our dining rooms, where we see between 3,000 and 5,000 students a day, all of that food waste ends up as compost.
Likewise, the food waste at the Haven all goes to Black Bear Composting.
So Black Bear comes by, picks up everything
Once a week.
brings it back, and turns it into compost.
They weigh it, we pay for it,
Yeah,
and then they sell it. They have to make money.
they sell it after it's good, marketable compost.
And it ends up back at UVA Gardens and our Morven Garden down south of Charlottesville. It ends up back on areas where it's being connected again to the UVA community, which I think is really cool.
That's terrific. Good.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the things that have worked? You talk about reducing the amount that you're serving students in the first place. How that sounds like a real tough nut to crack, to figure out how much to make.
So that's this technology tool that we have answers all of those. I wish I could speak to the intricacies of that, but it's a numbers game, and so they're able to track patterns. Our chefs look at everything that's happening in the Charlottesville area. They do weather forecasting. It's things to anticipate the guest count. We have enough historic data where we're able to track that. We know about how many students are going to come through, let's see, our first year residential dining room when there's a football game. If it's an early game, if it's a late game, they change numbers based on that. It's a hugely complex, but we've got production teams at every dining room, and they know their guests, they know their clientele, and they work to make that an efficient process.
So I had a question before the film started by somebody who was asking at catered events, what happens to the food at the end of the night, right, when everybody leaves, but there's still a ton of food there? Do the student workers get to take some of it home? Does it all go into compost?
Most of it goes into compost right now. I just did a zero waste baseball event where we almost got to zero waste, but the volume that we're dealing with is so big. There's so many hot dogs that a student can take home. We've got 6 trays of hot dogs. They try, but so again, that source point reduction is important. But we do have we're looking at things like a diminishing buffet, and so trying to forecast better for catered events.
A diminishing buffet.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
And so the dining rooms are a little bit easier to forecast because you have a consistent clientele that's coming in, or guests that are coming in. Catering is different. You can anticipate 250 guests. We can anticipate 80 people in the theater, and then 20 show up. So trying to forecast hypothetically. So trying to forecast that is really tricky. That's where we're looking at. A food donation program will be really important, but this diminishing buffet is more of a movement on a cultural change, and so it's minimizing the amount of food that's produced, and so by the end of the event you expect to see empty trays, and that is a big shift from how chefs cook in the kitchen, what they're preparing, and then what guests they're expecting to see when they walk into their event. So we're at the beginning stages of that. It's fantasy at this point, but the food donation program, we have an amazing partner at UVA called Campus Kitchens. It's a nonprofit based out of DC. We have a student group here. It's very personal. They connect with our chefs and our production managers, and if there is excess food, a student come by, they have their own trays, they re-prepare what's been put out in our dining rooms as single portion meals, which ends up at Blue Ridge Area Food Bank.
So I think that's really interesting because it's something of a theme of both what you all have been talking about, but also something that we saw in the film, which is that there's a lot of potential for technology and smart solutions, but ultimately this idea of cultural expectations seems like it's underlying so much of this. What is it that we expect to see in the supermarket? What is it that we expect with respect to sell-by dates, for example, or use-by dates? And so that, when Evie says it's education at the heart of this, part of what needs to change, it's not just providing more information, it's shifting expectations and kind of our culture around this stuff.
Yeah. So I think the last question that you had about the biggest, most pressing issue or answer, I think is closing the link between our chefs and our consumers. I'm in a different case. I'm in a dining room, and so they swipe in, they come, they have all this food in front of them, they sit down, they eat. I don't think a lot of the students that sit down think about how much work goes in, how many chefs are behind the lines producing all of that food at once. And so closing line, I've had a lot of success with student groups that want to do a flipped Friday, so taking meat off the center of their plate, or they want more vegan options. And so I look at my role as connecting those two parties. The chef will happily come in the morning and he doesn't talk to students maybe, or he's just getting his job done behind the scenes, and connecting those two experiences together. I think we've had a lot of success with that. and continuing to do that will be important. So.
Other experiences with that kind of transformation, yeah.
Well, I just, Massimo Butara talked about social gastronomy. And the definition is the use of power, uses the power of food and gastronomy to address social inequality, improve nutrition education, eliminate food waste, and create local jobs. And I think that piece of it is crucial, that education of knowing how food and culture intersect. And also just this, we need, like in New York, they have a network now where there are trucks that go around to the restaurants at closing time and collect all the leftover food and bring it to shelters. And I feel like every city could have something. It would give jobs to people, and it would cut down on the waste. I mean, we
Interestingly, I think we kept seeing those trucks in the movie, and I was waiting for some explanation, but they never really talked about it. But we kept seeing those trucks appear. Good. Karen?
I just wanted to add more of our traditional food pantries, unlike Haven doing prepared meals, but food pantries, we're really encouraging, and many of them are adopting a model called client choice, which is instead of clients coming and just being handed a pre-packed bag or box of food, they walk through the pantry. Loaves and Fishes is a great example. Many of you may know it. And the client is walked through the pantry with a volunteer, and they get to select what food they want. And that way they're not being given food that they themselves may not eat or want to prepare. And they're leaving it for others to choose. And that gives both clients a lot more dignity and also cuts down on some of the food waste problems.
Terrific, yeah. Why don't we open things up for a few minutes and take some questions from you all? This is where I should have had plants. Questions, Zoe? Andy?
How are you guys dealing with food deserts in Virginia? Do you guys have
You're looking at me?
Yeah.
Yeah. We are not directly addressing it. There are organizations looking at that. There have been attempts in the state legislature about trying to incentivize grocery stores to go into some of those food deserts. It's not getting a lot of traction this year. We work on making sure that people living in need in rural areas, that where they don't have food pantries accessible, we operate mobile food pantries, and we have partners to try and get food to folks in those areas. Seniors who can't get to food pantries, we have a very large program that's really delivering food boxes to their homes now. So it's a little different than your question. I can't say that we're addressing food deserts specifically ourselves.
Yeah.
I maybe have more of a comment, but I work in the Office for Sustainability at UVA, and I do a lot of educational tabling. And I'm always really shocked because people come up to me and they ask why they need to compost their fruits and vegetables because they assume it will break down in the landfill. And I thought that was a really interesting point of the movie. But how can we educate community members about that issue? Or are there any attempts at outreach going on right now? Because I think that is a really big misconception that is a stumbling block for a lot of folks.
Yeah, we've tried a lot of things at UVA Dining to try to get kids to compost. My most shocking moment was we were doing a waste audit, and we had, okay, you can compost these and you can recycle these, and the student came up and said, oh, you can't compost food. It's like, okay, I don't know where to start with that. We've done signage is really important. It is. I didn't believe that coming into the job, but it is, and so we've developed signage that has specific items for what exactly goes where. Turns out that signage needs like neon lights and flashing things to get people to look at it, but it's there. And so right now we're working with the population of our guests that want to compost. And so giving sort of an opt-in option. And so when you have your traditional landfill recycling, people are really good about recycling. So I think compost is next. In one of our cafes, we have a receptacle. It's got a door where you can open it to compost. And so shrinks the volume that we're getting, so we're not composting as much, but what we are composting, there's no contamination, and it ends up at Black Bear and it comes back as soil. So it's a smaller volume, but it's quality over quantity at this point. So starting small has been effective. The broader engagement, I don't know. I welcome your suggestions. Again, it's a huge cultural shift. So what I found value in is just targeting different champions within our dining rooms and having them lead the charge in whatever, in waste minimization or responsible sourcing, whatever they're after. But identifying that champion, that passionate person who's going to lead that change, it has to be by location, I've found. So I hope that helps.
But there's something a little bit frustrating about that, right? How did you graduate from high school and get into the University of Virginia and you don't know what it is, right? Somehow we have to think about curriculum at the high school level or middle school level or elementary school level, right? So that it becomes normal. It becomes the default. And as Samantha just suggested, and as I think was pointed out in the film, at one point, everybody threw out their recyclables because they weren't recyclables, they were trash. But I think in most places in America, we just by default put our cans in one place, our papers in one place, and the trash in the other. And so this is just the next logical step, but it's taken several decades beyond the transformation of making recycling the default. But I think that is the challenge, right? How do we shift that? What's a waste audit?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
So there's a couple different ones. We did a waste audit on Friday, and we divert people from the dish returns. When all you care to eat dining room, they come, they put their plates on a tray, and it disappears in the back. We bring that front of house. And so we're sorting waste in front of students, but we do unavoidable and avoidable, so we don't expect you to eat apple cores and cups and things like that. But all the food waste, it's a very visual demonstration of how much is being wasted during lunch period. In retail options, we have the ability to compost, and so a waste audit is essentially a student or myself standing next to a receptacle and going, no, wait, you can do this and this and this. A big problem we've had, actually, I think, is on the manufacturing side. A lot of these eco products have come out, and so we have the ability to compost that entire, you get a little bowl, a grain bowl, and your fork is compostable, the lid is compostable, the bowl itself is compostable, and I don't think we've done an effective job communicating that, because they're still trying to sort. Yeah. And if you add 3 levels of sorting into that, they're not going to do it. They're going to throw it into landfill. So.
One thing that the film didn't talk very much about was residential composting and that end of things. So I did my own informal waste audit in the form of, I just started composting at home, and I said to myself, I can't believe I haven't taken my garbage out in 2 weeks because there's so much less of it, right? It was shocking to me, and all I needed to do was go down to McIntyre or go to the farmer's market, both of which, right, that's an example of policies and opportunities that can subsidize my costs, right? I don't have to contract with Black Bear. I just need to, maybe once a week, bring all this compost down, and now I don't have to pay the city as much to haul my trash away because there is so much less of it. And I was struck by it, and I knew about composting, right? I want to think about how we can broaden that lesson, right? And convey to people, well, it's not that hard to do, and it's win-win.
South Korea.
Yeah. Right? Build in those incentives.
A lot of it is consistency, too. So even at UVA, just based on different vendors and whatever the volume they're dealing with, there's different products at each place. So students might have to sort their tops and their cups in one place, and then everything's compostable in another place. And so that's a responsibility of us to make sure things are consistent, so we can have a smooth education campaign, and we can say this is absolutely what you do in any location at UVA dining that you're in. But then they go to every other place in Charlottesville, and it's different. Yeah. So it's hard to do a streamlined consumer.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and an important challenge, I think, for practitioners, but also policymakers to keep in mind. But David, I think you're absolutely right. The South Korea example, I mean, that's, Mario Vitale was saying, like, make capitalism, work in this area, and, there's a sense in which the South, it's an economic incentive, right, on the South Korean side, and we've got a version of that, right? I have to put trash stickers on my garbage bins, and I don't have to use as many if I get to compost for free, which I do, right? So we're on that path, but we need to, shine a bright light on it and somehow convince people that it's easier to walk down.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, Gabby.
I think something that was missing within the film was that they're like, everyone can compost. It's just super easy. And while I know that there are paths to doing that at UVA and beyond, when I graduate and I'll find a way to do it because I'm passionate about it, if it isn't an obvious option for people and they don't have like a little, even a patch of land to make a compost pile or a place to drop it off, they're just not going to do it. And especially as we're moving towards cities more and more, most people are moving to the city. I just don't really feel like the film touched on that issue. So like, what do you guys think is going to happen? Is it just going to be that we're dependent on these companies that we're paying money to use, or what are other solutions?
Well, I like the points that you're making. One of the things about the organization of the film that I liked was, step one is to generate less waste, right? Step two is to generate less waste, right? All the way up to as little as possible that you even have to compost. But what do you guys want to add to that?
And as much as there's this ideal that in our backyards we'll have a little compost bin, or we'll put our compost out in the backyard, do you know the reality of that is raccoons, skunks, and rats who will dig from a long distance to get to your compost pile and eat all the good stuff. There's a downside to that. That's a public health issue, I think.
Right, which is why I take my compost somewhere else. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, I think the model, I think it was in South Korea that they're doing, where it's an apartment complex and they have subcontracted through a waste management company of some sort. I think that is the model to go on. I don't know how they enforce that. I'm just thinking about my networks and the people is you have to be passionate about composting to bring it to a place outside of your home. So that requires a different policy change, but I think that decentralized sort of by the community, by the apartment complex will answer that urban question.
So that's a really good way to put it, right? That what the objective ought to be is to make it easy and cheap for people who aren't passionate at all, right? That's the goal. Not to give options to the people who are already passionate and energetic and enthusiastic about this, but to make it easy for the people who don't care about it, not even to think about it and do it anyway, right? But that's as true about taking less on your plate in the first place. Can you just say one thing about Trayless dining? Because that was sort of a move before you got to UVA that was really significant.
So it was before I got to UVA. I think we took away the trays from dining rooms in 2008.
So it used to be that people would take a tray, right, and then move down the line, fill it up, and then carry it to their table.
Right, and so now we portion at the station, at most of our stations, and so our chefs and our line cooks are behind there giving the exact portion of rice and salmon or meat or whatever it is. And students can come take the plate and then they go sit down, right? You only have two hands. The idea is to cut down on the amount of food they take, but it also is a water conservation method. We don't have to do as many dishes back of house.
You don't have to wash the trays if there are no trays.
Right, and that's what speaking of the cultural change thing, this is what I'm obsessed with in my job, is because these first years come in and it's exactly, I think, what I did in college, what most people do. You've got 10 options. Of course, you're going to take 10 pieces of pizza and everything that looks good and that looks good. And so we're trying to figure out a way, whether it's design of the dining rooms or encouraging smaller portion sizes. We have continuous service. You can always come back. But sort of instilling that behavior of not taking as much is tricky. But, all that is in Trayless dining.
Okay, I promised that we would be short and sweet, and so what I think we'll do is give everybody a chance to make a couple of last comments. We can just go down the line.
Well, I'm just taken by Massimo Bottura and his broth of everything. And I love that phrase. I I just keep it in my mind all the time when I'm working and thinking and cooking at home, that let's just think of food as the broth of everything.
So I'm going to make another plug for food service because we deal with so many students and watch lots of documentaries. There's lots of information. People, our guests, know more about food systems than they ever have before. If you ever see anything in a restaurant, in a dining room, reach out to the chef. There is no chef that doesn't want a challenge, that doesn't want to minimize food waste, that doesn't want to give you the best experience. So if you find a problem, if there's a substitution that can be made, just reach out. These people want to help, but they're behind the line. They don't get to interact with guests very often. And so I encourage, in any restaurant that you're in, if you have a suggestion, I think they're always open to hearing it. They want to make your experience better, and they're open for it. So
I guess I just want to comment. I learned a lot personally from the film, but also just to say that there are a lot of people in need still in this country, in this area, in this neighborhood, perhaps working in this shopping center, and that there's a lot of people working together to try and get the food that would have otherwise been wasted into their hands, and you should, as a community, feel really good about that, but there's still obviously work to do.
I guess I'm indicting myself for not being more politically involved, but the city of Charlottesville had $9 million extra dollars in their budget this year. Was there any discussion about a community recycling, food recycling program, a can for everybody to put their stuff in, or a new system, a new program? $9 million. I'm sure it'll get spent, but.
All right. I would like to thank our panelists for joining us, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming out. And again, thank you very much to the Alamo for making this possible. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.